we all need to introspect, weigh the pros and cons of democracy, and arrive at our own personal views on the subject. Let's start with a review of the main arguments typically presented against democracy. Democracy can lead to instability as the leaders keep changing in a democratic government. Quick action is not possible in democracy because many people need to be consulted before making any kind of decision. Politicians are not too concerned about morality in a democracy because this form of government is all about political competition and power play. In fact, electoral competition provides a lot of scope for corruption. Elected leaders may not necessarily be qualified to understand the best interests of the people. This can lead to bad decisions. Finally, it can be said that ordinary people are not qualified to select a good leader, and so should not be given that power. Many of these arguments are indeed valid. However, some of the points mentioned could apply to any form of government where power is misused. The above arguments against democracy may showcase it is not the ideal form of government. But the debate here is whether democracy is better than other forms of governments that we are aware of. To resolve this dilemma, let's look at the other side of the coin. The arguments for democracy. China recorded the worst famine from 1958 to 1961 in the history of the world, with a toll of more than 3 crore. Whereas India, in spite of worse economic conditions, did not have such an acute famine. Economists think it was because the government's policies in India were different. India, being a democracy, had multi-party elections, an opposition party looking over the government's shoulder, and a press free to criticize the government. Therefore, the Indian government responded to the food scarcity in a manner very different from that of the Chinese government. In a non-democracy, the rulers may or may not respond to the needs and wishes of the people. Thus, we arrive at our first argument in favor of democracy. A democratic government is more accountable to its people. As mentioned earlier, democratic decisions involve a series of consultations, meetings, and discussions among many persons. Granted that such a decision-making process is time-consuming, this helps a democracy guard against rash or irresponsible decisions. That's our second argument in favor of democracy. A democratic government can ensure better decisions. During our earlier discussions on democracy, you learned that all individuals may have different ideas, ideals, and values. This is especially true in a country of vast social diversity, such as India. However, in a democracy, no one can be regarded as a winner or loser permanently. Therefore, democracy enables people to deal with differences and conflicts in a peaceful manner. This was the sum of the arguments about the effects of democracy on the quality of government and social life. However, the more important aspect of democracy is the effect of democracy on citizens in enforcing political equality. Democracy enhances the dignity of citizens. It accords the same status to all people regardless of wealth or education. Rather than being subservient to a ruler, the citizens rule themselves through elected representatives. When they make mistakes, they assume responsibility for their own mistakes as well. Thus, democracy is better than other forms of government because it allows us to correct our own mistakes. No form of government can guarantee perfection. However, democracy as a form of government allows for relatively more transparency, public discussion, and correction of mistakes. Ours is a representative democracy. People rule through their elected representatives. The limited understanding of representative democracy is, firstly, it is not physically possible for all of them to sit together and make collective decisions. Secondly, all citizens may not have the time, skill, or inclination to take part in the decision-making process. It also limits us to democracy in a government. For an understanding of the operations of a democracy beyond government functions, we need to look at the broader meaning of democracy. For example, families and schools can be democratic as well. In a democratic family, the opinion of each family member is given equal importance in making a decision. Similarly, there is scope for democracy in schools as well. Students like teachers who encourage them to be curious learners. A decision is democratic if it is made after consultation of everyone likely to be affected by it. For example, in relatively small communities, like a Gram Sabha, all the members can sit together and make decisions directly. The features of democracy that we discussed in earlier modules provided a basic foundation for our understanding of democracy, and also what an ideal democracy should be like. Thus, broadly speaking, democracy involves public participation, consultation, and representation.